Good morning to all and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Thursday, July 11th at 10 a.m. We're here in docket number 2024-109E for a hearing on the application of Duke Energy Progress LLC for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and necessity for the construction and operation of Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities in Chesterfield and Darlington County, South Carolina. Appears all commissioners are present in the hearing room. Our court reporter this morning is Ms. Kira Ferguson, and we appreciate her being here for this hearing. I'll now recognize staff counsel, Mr. Russell, to read the docket, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, commissioners and council. We're here today for this proceeding in docket number 2024-109-E. Application of Duke Energy Progress LLC for Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity for construction and operation of Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities in Chesterfield and Darlington counties. As noted, this matter has been noticed by the Commission for today, July 11th, 2024 at 10 a.m. Council participating in the matter are available and the docket is in order. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let's have the parties who's here representing the company.
Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, members of the Commission, Tekla Henderson and Lyle Trawick on behalf of Duke Energy Progress.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Welcome, Mr. Trawick. And ORS.
Good morning. This is Cassidy Murphy and Ben Mustian with Office of Regulatory Staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you, Ms. Murphy and Mr. Mustian. Council, there's also three other parties I would like to mention that are not here today, but just in abundance of caution. South Carolina Parks, Recreation, and Tourism, South Carolina Department of Health and Environmental Control, South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. Council, are there any preliminary matters we need to take up prior to beginning the hearing?
None from the company. Thank you.
Nothing from ORS.
Okay. Would either party like to make a brief opening statement?
A very brief opening statement.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, come on. I think we're on.
It's on.
Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to present Duke Energy's first CEC PCN request in South Carolina since our application to construct the W. S. Lee Steam Station in Anderson County over a decade ago. Today, we look forward to discussing our plan to construct and operate the Robinson Solar Center, which we hope to site along the border of Chesterfield and Darlington counties. Now, arriving at this moment has taken years of foresight and careful consideration of our customers' growing needs, and we are excited to deliver on our promise to our customers and our dedicated stakeholders in the PD region and throughout South Carolina that we will pursue an all-of-the-above approach to establishing an increasingly diverse mix of resources that are reliable, affordable, and environmentally friendly. We appreciate your time and attention to our case, and we look forward to addressing any questions the Commission may have regarding the Robinson Solar Center. Thank you, Chair Powers.
Thank you very much. Ms. Murphy, Mr. Mustian.
Nothing from ORS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Henderson or Mr. Trawick, either one, please proceed with your case. Call your witness.
Yes, sir. At this time, Duke Energy Progress calls the panel of Mr. Justin LaRoche, Mr. Joseph Freeman, and Mr. Tyson Grinstead to the stand.
If you gentlemen would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. LaRoche. I see your microphone is on. Would you please state your name for the record?
Justin LaRoche.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy as Director of Renewables Development.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared on your direct supervision, direct testimony of 13 pages that was previously filed with the Commission as both a confidential version and a public redacted version in this docket?
Yes.
And if I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, with one exception. On July 3rd, 2024, I pre-filed with the Commission my amended direct testimony to reflect that the company executed a large generator interconnection agreement on June 19, 2024. The changes were to lines 11 through 19 on page 9 of my direct testimony.
Aside from those changes, do you have any other additions or corrections to your direct testimony?
No.
Chair Powers, I move that Mr. LaRoche's pre-filed amended direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand while maintaining the confidentiality of the portions of Mr. LaRoche's pre-filed amended direct testimony that were pre-filed under seal, consistent with Commission Order 2024-304 issued in this docket.
The amended direct testimony of Mr. Justin LaRoche will be placed in the record as if given from the stand
Thank you. Mr. LaRoche?
and will be Exhibit 1. Is that right? Okay, no, excuse me, go ahead.
Thank you. Mr. LaRoche, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision one exhibit labeled as LaRoche Exhibit 1 that was previously filed with the Commission on April 22nd, 2024?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to this exhibit at this time?
No.
Chair Powers, I move that LaRoche Direct Exhibit 1 be moved into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Okay, that will be Exhibit 1 and will be placed in the record in this case.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Mr. LaRoche, would you please share a summary of your amended direct testimony with the Commission at this time?
Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to provide an overview of the Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities. My testimony also discusses the facility's schedule of key development milestones, the economic benefits, and the cost estimate and allocation of costs associated with the facility. The Robinson Solar Center is a 76 megawatt alternating current solar photovoltaic generating electric facility to be located in Darlington and Chesterfield counties on company-owned land adjacent to the existing Robinson nuclear plant and Darlington combustion turbine plant. The facility is one of the solar projects chosen through Duke Energy's 2022 Competitive Procurement of Renewable Resources program. Other facilities associated with the project include a new 230 kV solar substation, a new 230 kV generation tie line spanning approximately 225 to 250 feet from the new solar substation to the existing DEP Darlington County Plant 200 kV switching station, and additional equipment to support the facility, including circuit breakers, combiners, surge arresters, conductors, disconnect switches, and connection cabling. As for permitting, Duke Energy has completed discretionary permitting for the facility with Chesterfield and Darlington counties and has executed a large generator interconnection agreement on June 19, 2024. The company expects to start final engineering and construction permitting for the facility in 2025. Further, DEP has secured all necessary site control to develop and construct the facility. The company plans to commence construction in late 2026 and hopes to place the Robinson Solar Center in service by the end of 2027. The company is committed to operating the Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities within the applicable state and local laws and regulations. Finally, Duke Energy expects the Robinson Solar Center to have substantial economic contributions to the Chesterfield and Darlington County communities and to the state of South Carolina as a whole, including the creation of new jobs during the facility's construction and operation and the payment of property taxes to the communities throughout the anticipated 35-year life of the facility. This concludes the summary of my amended direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. LaRoche. Mr. Freeman, would you please state your name for the record?
Joseph Freeman.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision, direct testimony of 19 pages that was previously filed with the commission in this docket?
Yes.
And do you have any changes or additions to your direct testimony?
No.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I move that Mr. Freeman's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The direct testimony of Mr. Joseph Freeman consists of 19 pages, will be placed in the record as if given from the witness stand.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Freeman, did you also prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision 2 exhibits labeled as Freeman Direct Exhibit 1 and Freeman Direct Exhibit 2 that were attachments to your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to those exhibits at this time?
No.
Chair Powers, I move that Freeman Direct Exhibits 1 and 2 attached to Mr. Freeman's direct testimony be entered into the record as the next hearing composite exhibit.
The exhibits 1 and 2 of Mr. Freeman will be entered into the record, marked for ID and as Exhibit 2.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Freeman, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to discuss the findings and conclusions of environmental studies conducted for Duke Energy Progress with respect to the proposed Robinson Solar Center, including a desktop review of the site, the field-based wetland delineation review, the protected species habitat assessment, reconnaissance archaeological field survey, which included pedestrian walkover and limited shovel testing, and a Phase 1 environmental site assessment. The desktop review of the site did not identify any vulnerability that would prevent the construction and operation of the Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities, and the field-based wetland delineation did not identify any water bodies within the Robinson Solar Center site, leading ERM to conclude that, based on the current design of the Robinson Solar Center, impacts to wetlands or streams are not anticipated. The protected species habitat assessment found low or no potential for most federally and/or state-listed species to occur within the Robinson Solar Center site. However, on behalf of DEP, ERM has initiated informal consultations with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service regarding tricolored bat and with the South Carolina Department of Natural Resources for Rafinesque's big-eared bat, southern hognose snake, and spotted turtle. The Cultural Resources investigation concluded that construction and operation of the Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities as proposed should be allowed to proceed as planned without further consideration of archaeological resources. Visually, given the lack of topographical relief, development of the Robinson Solar Center is likely to be visible among the surrounding landscape. However, because of the vegetative buffers included in the preliminary site plan and the existing power infrastructure at the site, as well as DEP's planned landscaping, construction, and operation of the Robinson Solar Center is not anticipated to have a significant impact on the surrounding viewshed. Further, DEP anticipates no glare impact from the Robinson Solar Center to surrounding residences and public roads due to how the solar modules will be situated throughout the site, the anti-reflective coating on the modules, and the vegetative buffer surrounding the facility. Based on the Phase 1 environmental site assessment, ERM concluded that an additional assessment in connection with the property is not warranted at this time. In short, the proposed Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities are not expected to have significant adverse impacts on the environment, including wetlands, protected species, and cultural resources. The impacts to the environment, if any, are anticipated to be limited to the immediate area where the solar panels and associated facilities are installed. As such, I conclude that any impact to the environment from the proposed Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities are justified. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Freeman. And finally, Mr. Grinstead, would you please state your full name for the record?
Yes, Tyson Grinstead.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Duke Energy Corporation as the State Energy Policy Director for South Carolina.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision, direct testimony of 13 pages that was previously filed with the commission in this docket?
Yes.
And do you have any changes to your testimony at this time?
No.
If I asked you the same questions that were asked in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes.
Chair Powers, I move that Mr. Grinstead's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Grinstead's pre-filed direct testimony consisting of 13 pages will be entered into the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Grinstead, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony?
Yes.
Would you please share that with us at this time?
Yes. Good morning, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to support the company's application for a certificate of environmental compatibility and public convenience and necessity to construct and operate the Robinson Solar Center, a 76 megawatt alternating current solar photovoltaic electric generating facility and associated facilities in Chesterfield and Darlington counties. Specifically, my testimony supports DEP's planning and need to construct the Robinson Solar Center. Through its integrated resource planning process, DEP analyzes system needs and compares various generation options in terms of, among other things, cost and reliability. The company's recent IRPs have consistently identified significant amounts of new solar generation in the portfolio of resources needed to reliably meet future system needs. The proposed Robinson Solar Center was one of the solar projects selected through the company's 2022 Competitive Procurement of Renewable Energy Program, which was designed to meet the solar generation needs identified in the IRP process. The Robinson Solar Center facility is an important step towards meeting the projected energy needs of the company's system, as identified in both the company's recently approved IRPs and the proposed 2023 IRP now before the Commission. In alignment with resource planning principles and the state's planning objectives under Act 62, the facility will help DEP continue to enhance resource diversity while operating a reliable, affordable system. The Robinson Solar Center is a fuel-free source of energy that is part of the company's all-the-above generation strategy to help meet our customers' future energy needs while also mitigating fuel cost volatility and customer exposure to fuel commodity prices. Convenient siting of this needed facility is supported by the company's ability to use existing land and the existing switching station. Development of the Robinson Solar Center is also supportive of economic development efforts here in South Carolina. The availability of renewable energy is essential to current and prospective large commercial and industrial customers as corporate sustainability goals and commitments are important considerations in their decisions to locate, maintain, and expand their operations in South Carolina. The company intends to include the Robinson Solar Center as part of the resources used to provide additional renewable energy program offerings to its customers. In conclusion, the Robinson Solar Center is a cost-effective generation addition to the company's fleet that will serve system economy and reliability, satisfy the needs identified in the IRP, and provide additional fuel-free energy to serve the electric needs of DEP's customers now and in the future. Therefore, the public convenience and necessity supports the construction of the Robinson Solar Center, and the company respectfully requests the Commission issue a certificate for the construction and operation of this Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities. This concludes the summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grinstead. Chair Powers, at this time, Mr. LaRoche, Mr. Freeman, and Mr. Grinstead are available for cross-examination by the parties and for questioning by the Commission.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Any questions from ORS?
No, sir. Thank you.
Any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Belser?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for being here this morning. I'm going to throw this to the panel, but Mr. Grinstead, I know that you touched on it in your testimony some, but can you expand for me a little bit on the options that the company considered with regard to cost and reliability before selecting a solar project?
Sure. So the way I look at it, Commissioner Belzer, is it all started with a 2020 IRP process that was approved by the commission. And so within that framework, there are different resources, whether it be gas, whether it be nuclear, whether it be solar, that are considered. And all of those are looked at in terms of cost and reliability amongst other factors. And so here in that IRP, there was over 6,000 megawatts within DEP selected in that 2020 and then the 2022 update. And so this project flows through the CPRE, but starts with the IRP.
Well, and I appreciate you mentioning the CPRE, because don't we have some, I don't know that the word competing, but there are multiple issues since the passage of Act 62 that must be considered. Would that be a fair assessment?
I think that is a fair statement. I think here I would emphasize that this project was one of the very top projects within the CPRE. So it was in the top 10% of the projects that all came before that utility ownership track. So I think there were over 45 projects, and this was in the top 10% of those projects. So when you looked at, and I think Justin can expand on this, but when you looked at factors that were related to cost and factors that were not related to cost, all those together selected this project as being one of the very best options we had.
And I know that Duke files reports, and I did not look back at this, but do you know how many projects were selected from the 2022 IRP?
It's over 12.
Okay.
I want to say it's between 12, but I think it's actually closer to 15.
And do you recall how many of those were in South Carolina?
I can't speak to the PPA side. I've got responsibility for the
I'm
Duke-owned assets. So
okay.
of their 6 Duke-owned assets, 3 are in South Carolina.
Okay. From the 2022 CPRE?
Correct.
Okay. And I find it interesting. Can you tell me a little bit how the ability to site this on company-owned land that's already owned by the company is a benefit or not?
Sure. I mean, I think, and Justin can elaborate on this, but I think it helps select the project because if you look at the non-economic factors, we already had the switching station, we already had the land, so it became a natural use of that site. So I think anything, if you want to add, Justin, but I think ultimately it was a benefit to help. You know, we didn't have to go procure the land or anything like that.
Yes, and if I may correct for the record too, it was 4 of the 6 projects in the 2022 RFP were in South Carolina.
Thank you.
And then the big benefits why we selected this site is company-owned land, existing interconnection. There's no new switching station or tap station that we needed to be built. Tax benefits was another big one. Given that there's a retired coal facility, the project now qualifies for enhanced bonus tax credits underneath the Inflation Reduction Act, which helps lowers the overall cost to customers of the facility. And then just the compatibility with the community, given the long history of power generation in this area, our longstanding relationships with the counties as well.
Are there any issues with the fact of it being a solar facility so close to a nuclear facility?
None. So the only connection, and we're more closer to the combustion turbine property than the nuclear facility. So we're not inside the fence at all within the nuclear facility. Electrically, they're separate, right? We've got our own point of interconnection at the combustion turbine switching station. And then obviously on the transmission system, they'll be connected. But other than that, there's no conflict or real impacts between each other.
No, I think and I didn't make this clear, but I think I'm also concerned about security. But if it's not inside the fence of the nuclear or too close to that should not be an issue, should it?
Correct. Then the Robinson Solar Center does trigger NERC security requirements as well, and so it's designed and will be operated within NERC standards.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you for answering my questions. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Belzer. Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Good morning.
Morning.
And I hate this. I have to look over. Remind me how many acres the site was. I know it was in testimony somewhere, but I've already forgotten.
Correct. Just under 350 acres is what we anticipate will occupy within the solar panels themselves and associated equipment and kind of within that fenced area.
Okay. And I guess thinking about that, the size, the acreage, there's existing natural gas infrastructure in or around that site, correct?
Correct.
All things equal, if there was a combustion turbine unit or whatever of comparable generation size, or all things equal as far as generation production, do you know about how many acres that would require?
To clarify the question, if we were to replace the solar facility with a 76 megawatt gas unit, what's the acreage on a gas? Unfortunately, I can't speak to that, as I don't support the siting of gas units. Solar is roughly 5 to 8 acres or so per megawatt AC. Tyson, I don't know if you got any perspectives on minimum acres requirements for a unit on gas.
Not for gas. I mean, I think the key here is that what we already had the land, and so the solar kind of fit nicely on the land.
When do you know? I mean, roughly, would it be more? Would it be less?
I wouldn't know.
Who would know?
I would hypothesize that it probably would be less. I mean, the existing gas units out there that largely have been retired, I think all except for 2 are retired today, and those are planned to be retired. That footprint is less than this 350 megawatts, 350 acres. However, the attributes specific to this site are very favorable and conducive to solar in the company's procurement of solar resources.
Okay. And I guess relative to the question that Commissioner Belser asked, and I think Mr. Greenstead, you responded to the evaluation question, but what specific alternatives were considered when evaluating whether to move forward with the project?
So the way I look at this, Commissioner Caston, is there were kind of multiple dockets and processes where this project ultimately flowed through. So if you start in 2020 with the IRP that was approved by the commission, and then the 2022 update, we looked at all kinds of resources. So, to go onto the system for DEP. And so, that was gas, that was nuclear, that was solar. And so through that process, there were 6,000 megawatts of new solar for DEP selected. And so then that kind of flowed to the CPRE as the mechanism of let's say, okay, which projects are we going to select? How are we going to bring the system on? And then so in the CPRE, there was both the utility-owned solar and the third-party solar. And so then this project was one of the very top winners that came out of the utility-owned solar track. So kind of flowing through through the process.
So there was roughly just under 1,000 megawatts procured in that 2022 RFP. This is just one of those projects.
Commissioner Caston, could I ask a clarification?
Certainly.
Gentlemen, I know I brought this up, but I just want the record to be clear. The RFP that was conducted pursuant to the CPRE process, was done by an independent or third party. This was not something that Duke ran and selected their own projects. Is that correct?
Right, and
Can you elaborate on that? I just want that clear in the record, if you would.
Right, that's correct, Commissioner. And then generally there were not only Duke projects in that utility-owned track. So there were also projects that could be built by a third party and then transferred over to Duke.
But the selection was of the projects that were bid in. There were projects bid in that were Duke-owned and a third party owned. Duke did not make the ultimate selection, is that correct?
Correct. The RFP is designed, administered, and evaluated.
Administered is the word I was looking
Yeah.
for, thank you.
Charles Rivers Associates is that third-party independent administrator that provides oversight, transparency, reporting to ensure that everything is done fairly.
I just wanted to be clear on that. And Commissioner Caston, I apologize for interrupting, thank you.
No problem. Thank you very much. And Mr. Greenstead, I understand what you're saying, but I guess what I'm trying to understand or make sure I understand is relative to comparing generation sources relative to cost and reliability. I appreciate the fact that, you know, the IRP says such and such and CPR does, but do you have any figures that reflect a specific evaluation relative to cost and reliability of other generation sources?
No. Outside of what's done in the IRP, which set our solar procurement requirements to maintain system reliability, that is done in the IRP space. That then established and pursued our solar procurement RFP, which this is then the result, the outcome of that specific RFP to procure solar resources.
So what I'm hearing is that there's really not been an evaluation of, I guess, this particular generation facility as compared to a CT unit or some other generation on the site relative to cost, reliability.
So that's in the IRP space and docket, which then established our solar procurement needs. And then that 2022 RFP was just focused on procuring the least cost, most reliable solar facilities. Did not consider other generation types in that RFP.
So I think I'd add, Commissioner, that we're looking at all the above, and as you know, with all the population growth that's happened in South Carolina, the economic development that's come here, that folks who are looking here, we're looking at adding a lot more resources through the IRP, and so once the IRP got finished, you know, selecting how much of solar, how much gas, how much, you know, everything else, we had to go find good sites and good places to build solar. And so I think this site, because of what Justin mentioned with the taxes and everything, lent itself very well to solar.
I understand that, and I appreciate that clarification. And I understand all the above, but does an all the above approach still consider and include cost and reliability considerations, or is all the above? What does all the above mean?
I think there's a macro and micro way to look at it to a degree. And so I'll take my best stab at it. But I think on a macro level, you know, all the above means, you know, in the interest of customers and, you know, making sure we have system economy, we have reliability, we've got to have a diverse energy mix. I think we're, you know, seeing the IRP select that. And so I think from a macro level that, you know, it goes back to what we were saying with the IRP. You know, from a micro level, part of the reason I think we're here today is that we're trying to get this certificate to build this project. I think as a part of that, we have to consider, you know, cost, we have to consider reliability, we have to consider, you know, all the factors that go into this project. And I think, you know, ultimately we look at this project as a win-win in a lot of different perspectives, for the customer, for the state. And so, you know, I think definitely we had to look at cost, but you know, there's the macro and the micro way of looking at it, I think.
I understand that, but if I understood Mr. LaRoche, you really didn't look at cost relative to comparing this generation source with other generation sources. Is that correct?
That's not a part of the solar procurement RFP. That comparison is a part of the IRP, which then sets that strategy of how much generation do we need to go procure.
Okay, but relative to, at the risk of sounding repetitious, I'm gonna try to ask it differently and make sure I understand. I think I understand what you're saying about the IRP. IRP is a high-level view. This is what we want to pursue, and, you know, tomorrow it could change, but that's kind of the high-level view, correct?
Correct.
But for this, you know, we're getting ready to, you're wanting us to decide that this is the best thing to do, the right thing to do according to the Siting Act. And what I think I've understood is that relative to an economic analysis, an engineering economic analysis of present worth, whatever, analysis of this generation source versus other generation source relative to cost and reliability, that has not been done.
So I think indirectly it is being done. The IRP process does not model and select individual units, different plants, right? It sits at that higher fundamental resource planning level. And then it sets out the company's marching orders to go procure those resources. And the way that the company ensured that we're selecting and procuring a balanced portfolio of third-party owned and company-owned solar facilities was through those competitive procurement of renewable resources, RFPs. So I think the IRP sets our marching orders, how much solar to add to the system. Then that solar procurement RFP is our cost competitive way to then procure the least cost resources.
Commissioner Kastman, can I take a stab at asking that question?
Please.
Okay. I think some of what we're asking is, in going from the macro level, which started in 2020 and got updated in 2022, and going to the micro level, what indicators told you that this was the most cost-effective investment that you could make? And that may draw from, I think it has to draw from the CPRE process. Now, did that help what you're asking?
I think so, but
Okay, then go
let you
ahead.
gentlemen decide that.
Yeah, so I think the fact that this facility is a result of that 2022 solar procurement process validates that it is a cost-effective facility. Amongst, there was 46 projects bid into that RFP. This was among that top 10% from a cost standpoint. 50% of that RFP is weighted to cost effectiveness, which uses that levelized cost of energy. The other 50% is non-economic factors: stage of a development, does it have its permits, credibility of the bidder, can they meet those obligations, buildability of the site, is this a site you want to own and operate for 35 plus years? So the fact that it went through that RFP is why we're bringing it today, and why we know that we can stand behind that it's a cost-effective resource.
But just for clarification and not to take over, that the CPRE process only looks at cost effectiveness within the realm of solar.
Correct, relative to other solar facilities.
Right.
You actually asked the next question I was going to ask. So CPRE is just relative to comparing solar to solar.
Correct.
So, and you're, well, I'm not going to tell you what you're saying. Relative to the IRP, are you saying, or are you not saying, that the IRP isn't a determination or, in other words, an IRP, are you saying that the commission can and should make these kind of decisions on whether it's cost-effective, reliable, and a certificate of need should be established based on an IRP? Is that what you're saying?
I think to Tyson's point, they're all interrelated. We wouldn't have done the 2022 CPRE had it not been needed, right, to implement and deliver on the prior approved IRP.
All right, well, I beat that dead horse. Let me move on. Thank you. Did you have?
Well, I would just say, Commissioner Caston, a good way to look at it is, I mean, this is my attempt at an analogy, so bear with me, but the IRP really is the game plan. If we were playing a football game, it's the game plan. You got X amount of run plays, X amount of pass plays. Once we decide we're calling a run play, we got to figure out how to do it the best we can. And so I think, once we figured out that we were going to have X amount of megawatts of solar in the IRP, we then had to figure out how to get it on the system and do it the best way we could. And I think the CPRE picked that up. And because of, the reasons that Justin mentioned, the tax benefits that may not have been here if we'd gone with the gas plant or something else, all of that led us to believe Robinson was a no-brainer for solar in this way.
Well, I wrote a few more questions, so I'll go through those quickly if I may, and if anything pops in your head, let me know. Relative to construction time period of other alternatives, how would the construction time period of this facility compare to, other alternatives, other generation sources?
So the construction window for this facility, solar facility of this size, is generally about a year to a year and a half once dirt starts moving and piles being driven, which is relatively efficient and I think short. I can't speak to a definitive timeline to build a gas plant or new nuclear facilities or others. But that's what we're looking at here. So we've already got the project's mature. We've got our permitting. We've got our interconnection agreement. We've secured our backfeed from transmission. We would plan to start construction that second half of 2026 and be done and placed in service at the end of 2027.
Thinking about life cycle costs, yeah, and I'm not, well, down the road, whatever the life is, I think you guys in the CPRE or whatever are saying 35 years, whenever it's time to put it to bed, whatever that is. Has the company done a life cycle analysis of the environmental impact? You got to replace these. It's got these rare metals, heavy metals, maybe lithium in storage. And what would be classified now as environmental hazards?
Yes, we have proactively thought through both the design life of the facility and what happens when we meet the end of it. So yes, it is going to be designed for a 35-year useful life. So all the equipment that we procure will be designed for that. Some pieces and parts will need to be replaced right along the way. Then we get to the end of that life. We've already, as part of going through the county permitting processes, we've already developed a decommissioning plan to lay out what is the plan to do with the facility, which will maximize the recycling or reusing of that equipment. The modules planned today are going to be polysilicon, which are rated to go into a normal commercial landfill. There's no hazardous material rated in a module. To the largest extent possible, though, we're going to recycle as much equipment. There's a lot of aluminum, right, steel in the racking structure. There should be some economic value to that as well. And then we'll evaluate that decision once we get closer to that 35-year period. That's one of the benefits of being on company-owned land and a utility-owned asset. we can make that economic decision of what makes the most sense. It might be economic to keep on running it for another 5 years. The modules themselves are rated. They come with a warranty from the manufacturer that at least within 20 to 25 years, most companies are 25 years, that those panels will still be producing up to 80% of that original nameplate capacity. So yes, panels will degrade over time, but they're still going to be producing significant amount of energy past year 25, and that's how we get to that 35-year target useful life. So there might be some additional investments we need to make and it might be economic to extend it beyond that to 40, or potentially repower the facility. Maybe the racking is still good, but we replace the modules. That'll be an economic decision you make as you get a little bit closer to that time period.
Okay. And I understand, I've heard, I think, others in other hearings at some point mention recycling and such. And sounds good, but yeah, I don't really know what that involves. I mean, you physically go out there and take these things out and melt them down. I mean, who does that? Is that being done now somewhere? Is that an existing process that you can evaluate what the approximate cost is?
That market is growing as the demand for solar panels and equipment continues to grow in the United States. We definitely continue to see a lot of solar panel manufacturers trying to provide solution for those as well. For example, you'll have some modules that get damaged and cracked during shipping or in construction that you can't use, and so we try to recycle those right out the gate. So either they'll go through several solar panel manufacturers have recycling programs where you can pay a fee to them and they'll take it back, recycle it, break it down to basic materials, and then reuse. Or there's third-party services that you can ship them off to as well. Or alternatively, they can always go into a landfill. We try to balance all of those factors with the cost and decommission and dispose of equipment in an environmentally friendly manner. So we are recycling modules on other projects today as they become not useful.
So as far as this cost, a cost estimate, which I know is not to be publicly shared, and I understand that, as far as the evaluation with other generation sources, we don't have those numbers. But relative to the decommissioning, as you said, and going through all that process you talked about, where is that estimate number? And I'm not saying, coal ash just came to mind when I was thinking about these things. The things that we don't think about now that maybe can jump up later down the road. And I think you said, the company has thought about these things. But thinking about it and then kind of trying to put numbers with it, do you have that? Do you have an estimate of what that is?
I don't have that number in front of me now, but as a part of that decommissioning plan, we did come up with a cost estimate based on today's cost and extrapolation. Additionally, as part of the CPRE evaluations, it also considers decommissioning costs as a part of those all-in costs on the utility ownership track, which provides some good oversight on our side. We don't necessarily know what third parties are going to do under a PPA, if they're planning to do that, or what financial support. But on the utility ownership track side, we do plan for it. It's a part of that economic evaluation. We've got a plan for it today. That'll continue to get updated as the project progresses and gets closer to that decision point. Additionally, we, from an accounting standpoint, since we have an obligation to retire that asset, we actually record a retirement obligation on our accounting books from a liability standpoint, fully recognizing we intend to be here to follow up with that obligation.
Spoken like an accountant.
It's my undergraduate degree.
I noticed. Tar Heel. So what you just said, I want to make sure I got it, is that in that confidential number, is that part of the decommissioning cost or estimate? Is it in that number, or is it like a separate thing?
No, it is not in that. The number, confidential number, is just the capital upfront cost. This would be a cost that's not incurred until 35 years after 2027. So yeah, it's not in that number.
Do you anticipate that being, we'll see what it is in 35 years and then pass that on to the customers, or are you going to kind of spread that out over 35 years?
So we accrue that balance now based on what we forecast that estimate is going to be. So there'll be a liability on the books for it.
Okay.
And then a lot of numbers may change, labor rates, the value of salvage value of equipment, right, may go up, may go down. And I think that liabilities will continue to be updated in a routine period.
Let me go through this quickly. I've not been quick, and I apologize. What is the company's reasoning for selecting 76 megawatts of capacity?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is just the significant amount of solar volume, megawatts established in the IRP needing to be procured. With that in mind, we sought to optimize this facility's design and size than the available footprint. So there's a lot of key attributes to this property. There's a lot of constraints as well, given the existing infrastructure, the transmission lines. So when you factor all those things in, we sought to maximize the size of a solar facility we could design here. That then yielded the 76 megawatts. We certainly would have and prefer to build larger facilities, as you typically see better economies of scale with a larger facility. Land availability and buildability was the key constraint here.
Okay. I keep looking at him, but feel free to jump in if anyone wants to.
Commissioner, I'm just hesitating to speak on behalf of DEP.
Well, I get it.
Happy to field any questions.
Anytime you need to speak up, feel free. Question in general, where are the majority of components used to construct and eventually repair the facilities manufactured?
At this point, we have only procured the long lead equipment pieces. We continue to see roughly 3-year lead time on the transformers and then the breakers. Those are the only 2 pieces that are procured at this point. I cannot say what locations those facilities are being manufactured in. The modules have not been procured at this point. There's a balance, right? We continue to see a lot more domestic manufacturing being established. Obviously, there's still a very large percentage coming from overseas. Southeast Asia is predominantly where we've traditionally been procuring modules from. But we have not secured any that equipment yet for this facility. So to be determined.
Well, if I could dig just a little bit deeper, and maybe that's all you have, but I know in other hearings, previous hearings, it seems like I've heard that there are efforts to have manufacturing here in the States for, I guess, batteries and panels, but relative to the raw materials and components that go into those panels, where do those come from?
Speaking of,
are
like
they domestic?
The silicon, the raw steel and iron, those elements? Or you're talking about like just the actual
The
panels?
rare earth metals, the lithium, the components required to build a solar panel and storage.
I cannot speak to directly where those are coming from, since we haven't procured we haven't selected the manufacturer themselves, but that would be decided by and procured by the OEM on the solar panels themselves.
So you're saying you don't know?
Correct.
You don't know if these rare earth metals and the components, lithium, you don't know if they're coming from domestic sources in the United States being mined here or in foreign countries?
I don't think I've got enough knowledge and confidence to be able to stay on the record where they're going to be coming from for this facility.
Either of you? No.
Well, I think what he was getting at is that we have to figure out who's actually what the manufacturer is going to be, and so that'll be, a process within that.
Following approval of the CECPCN, that final engineering and procurement of remaining equipment is the next steps. So a lot of that will happen in 2025.
Will, with either this facility or the addition of these type facilities, will spending reserves need to be added, or will they be needed to offset variable generation?
Well, can you restate that, Commissioner? I'm sorry, I didn't.
Will reserve dispatchable generation, CT units, will reserve dispatchable units need to be added or in existence to offset variable generation or any issues relative to?
So I think that's a benefit of this being a utility-owned project. Obviously, the CPRE had both utility, we were talking about earlier, had both a utility-owned track and a third-party track. One thing that's good about this being a utility-owned track solar project is that we can make sure that there's sort of a synergy with the rest of the grid, and that everything we're able to maintain and dispatch everything, and that if there's a maintenance issue, we need to take something offline, we can plan that out very well with it being a utility-owned solar track. And so to answer your question, I think one major benefit of this project is that it's something that would lend itself to reliability and system economy and overall just have a good synergy with the rest of the system.
And I think maybe just to add, I don't think any of the three of us are IRP modeling experts in any means, but I believe the IRP factors that in reserve margins in the system planning, which then is an aspect of how much solar gets procured or selected in the IRP. So I think it's already been accounted for in prior IRPs. Now we're, as part of this project, amongst others, we're implementing those IRPs.
I'm not sure if that was a yes or a no, but let me process it and let it stew just a little bit. Relative to solar unit, whether Duke owns it or ABC Solar owns it through a PPA, would dispatchable reserves be required for either one of them, regardless of who owned it, due to variability?
Yeah, I think that's beyond the scope of responsibility for this panel. It is more a question for perhaps the upcoming IRP dockets. I think that's more of an IRP space context.
Well, okay. And again, I'm not trying to be difficult, but part of what we're supposed to be doing with the certificate of need relative to a generation source is consider it with alternate sources relative to cost and reliability. But let's move on.
And Tyson, I think our response, or do you want to go ahead?
No, I think I would say, so in that I would point back to the 2020 IRP and the 2022 update as what Justin said, is kind of understanding how all this stuff, how everything on the grid, works together. And so I think this is a piece of that, which has come through all those systems to get here. But I think ultimately, I get what you're saying. I think, in terms of the reliability, I get where you're trying to go in terms of the cost and the reliability. And I think, with the reliability, this, to me, again, that was an advantage of it being a utility-owned solar project, is that we can easily have it, easily be able to use it in pair with the rest of the assets on the grid.
Thank you. Next question, quickly. Will this facility be used to support any voluntary renewable energy programs for which the company is seeking or may seek approval?
So I kind of look at Robinson Solar as sort of a Swiss Army knife for the system. You know, at its very basic level, it benefits ratepayers, but then it also has several other benefits that kind of are out there as well. And so I think one of those is that it can benefit customer programs that you all heard a few weeks ago. I think another is that it's attractive in the economic development space, both for people who are here in South Carolina and for people who are looking to locate here. But I think, you know, if you look at it from that perspective, it does have the benefit of being able to be used for programs that are the customer programs we talked about before.
Okay. And you're only using a portion of the site, as I understand it. Are there plans to build additional generation facilities on that site?
Not as it stands today. There's no, to our knowledge, other generation types being planned here.
Well, if not today, do you know, I mean, there's, as far as you know, nothing on the books looking into the future that involves.
Yeah, this not today. Certainly subject to change as system needs and opportunities arise. But as it stands today, this is the primary new generation planned for company-owned land right now.
Understand. And one of the benefits the company cites is the fuel-free nature of, you know, the resource. Has the company studied anticipated fuel savings? And if so, do you know what the estimated annual fuel savings would be?
I don't know the number, but I can tell you part of the reason, I think if you look even into the fuel statutes and some of the other policy rationales that have been out there in terms of that lend themselves to adding more solar onto the grid, that fuel-free nature, the fact that we, you know, don't have to worry about coal volatility and that lends itself to a direct benefit, and one reason why this project was selected.
But do you know if it exists? Has anyone evaluated that? Looks like it would be X amount of fuel savings based on the cost of fuels today. 5 years ago, 5 years from now, we estimate it will be X. Do you know if anyone's done that, or is? I mean, I hear this a lot, and I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying, what does that mean? I mean, what is it?
Not to our knowledge, that's been calculated. It's not a part of the CPRE evaluation process, quantifying that fuels number.
Okay. Does existing current South Carolina law dictate, mandate, require any percentages or quotas of renewable solar or anything?
So, Commissioner, I don't think there's any quota or anything that says that solar has to be treated over and above any other resource. But I do think there's several different pieces of South Carolina law that I would point to kind of look at solar being treated on the same level with the other resources. I mentioned Act 220 before. You know, the fact that it has diversity requirements and talks about the cost of fuel being really important. I would point you to the fuel statutes there. I think Act 220, which talks about solar in terms of economic development, is really important because it basically says South Carolina, for purposes of economic development, needs to be looking at solar. And then, of course, Act 62 talks about solar being, you know, on a fair level playing field with other resources. So I think all of those together, you know, they don't necessarily say solar is the most important resource, but it says solar should be in the all the above mix, in my view.
And relative to what I think you said at the beginning, they're being treated on the same level, which I agree. You know, all source, looking at all things considered, equal. And if you do that, that would still include looking at the solar versus the other generation sources versus cost, reliability, and so on, correct?
Right, and I think, kind of looking at that through the IRP and then having that selected out and finding the best spots to have solar in North and South Carolina.
And is this facility for the benefit of South Carolina customers?
I absolutely would argue that it is. I think, I talked a minute ago about this project being a Swiss Army knife, if you will. I think, number one, if you look at the fuel, you look at, the system economy, the reliability, the diversity that helps add to the grid, I would say that it absolutely benefits customers, but then it has those added benefits of being able to be able to attract economic development into South Carolina, which I think is really important right now as we're looking to be able to compete with our neighbors in that space. And then I think as well, as you mentioned, the customer programs, being able to leverage a project like this for customer programs. So you're there then looking at clean energy both on the grid as in general as a benefit, but then also kind of having the programs there to be able to use it.
I know this will probably break your heart, but I think it's my final question. Will the solar facility reduce overall cost to South Carolina customers as compared to other generation sources?
I think an answer to that question is beyond the scope of the CPRE and the evaluations. And yeah, it depends on, right, what are you comparing it to and the cost of those items. I don't think that's an apples to apples easy answer.
Commissioner, one thing I would say is it definitely reduces risk. So, I think the IRP, not to harpen everything back on it, but I think the IRP, one of the major goals that I would stress is that it adds diversity such that risk goes down. And so that in turn helps reduce costs. And I think overall that reduction in risk is something that is a very important factor when considering the question you just asked.
And that risk, I want to make sure I understand what that risk is. What is that risk?
So I think it's all kinds of, I think overall what I would say is a more diverse grid reduces all types of risk. So I think, in general, one potential could be fuel cost risk.
Okay. Well, it was my last question, but I need to follow. Relative to that, and, getting back to, where the raw materials, I don't know how long it takes to get these, but in other hearings, I've heard that a significant percentage of the raw materials, rare earth metals, things needed for storage and solar are foreign, not domestic. And if that is the case, I don't know, I don't keep tabs on that. I assume the company does. Is there risk associated with supply chain issues or geopolitical issues or such as that?
I think any generation type has similar risks in supply chain, in geopolitical, and tariffs, right? But I do feel like we are confident we will be able to go cost effectively procure the equipment needed to build this facility. The supply of modules is not short. Supply inverters. This is not a solar plus storage facility, so there's no batteries specific to this facility. We don't anticipate there being a shortage from a supply standpoint. Costs are obviously still very dynamic with administrative decisions on tariffs.
Gentlemen, thank you. I appreciate it, your forbearance, and thank you a lot.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Before we go any further, I'm told that the Department of Health and Environmental Control has joined us virtually. I'm not sure who it is, but if they would, please introduce yourself at this time. Ms. Dickman, are you there? Anyway, we'll keep going then. Any questions from ORS? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not through, Commissioner. Let's.
Sir,
Yes.
this is Jacqueline Dickman. I'm doing this by phone, and I'm sorry. It took me a moment to get myself unmuted. But I'm just watching, and I appreciate everything that I'm learning. So thank you.
Okay. Before we have further commissioner questions, I think it's a good time for us to take about a 10 or 12 minute break. If we could come back at 11:25, be great. And then well, at that point in time, Vice Chair Williams will take the floor. Thank you. Thank you all. We're back in the hearing of the application of Duke Energy Progress Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity for construction of operation of the Robinson Solar Center and associated facilities in Chesterfield and Darlington counties. We are in the middle of questioning the witnesses, and I would turn it over to Commissioner, or rather Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Gentlemen, good morning, still morning to you. By the way, you're doing a great job, even though you're leaving Joseph out. I don't know why you won't give him an opportunity to answer a question or two. I'm just kidding, Mr. Freeman. So I want to circle back to the line of questioning, and I will say that the past chair used to call me an elephant hunter, and I have no interest in taking the life of an elephant unless it was charging me and I needed to do so to get back home. But I do observe elephants whenever they are in the room. And I ask my colleagues, do they see them too? Just to make sure I'm not the only one looking at this large object that maybe everyone else is not paying attention to. And here in this hearing, it seems to me that there may be a little bit of confusion or a lack of clarity surrounding how we get here with your application, and here being the approval of your application. And I understood the questions that Commissioner Canston asked, and I think I understood your answers, but I'm trying to just drill down a little bit to understand your theory of how you all get to an approval of your application. So you all would agree that your IRP identified the need for solar facilities. And someone has to answer the question. I don't care who.
Yes.
Yes, okay. And you would also agree that the commission approved a selection process for solar facilities through your CPRE program.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're on the same page so far. We're walking down the same road. So based on the IRP and based on the CPRE, you filed the application before the commission today, this application.
Right.
Is that correct? All right. And help me understand what your theory or what is required for the commission to approve your application today, or whenever we decide to make a decision on this application, based on paragraph 8A of South Carolina Code Annotated 5833-110.
Right. So I think.
Do you need me to read that?
If you don't mind, that'd be great. Maybe.
Okay. And something to check, I wish I could put it up on the screen. But paragraph 8A of section 58-33-110, and if the lawyers need time to get to it, I can take my time, or I can indulge you and wait. But I'm going to start reading.
Mr. Vice Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
I have a copy that could be put on the screen if somebody can do it, because I don't know how to do that.
Okay. I think we can do that. If you could just pass that down my way, I will give it to the best dressed lawyer in the room.
I've just turned, that's what I've handed to the Vice Chair is just a Westlaw printout of the some of the statutes in the Citing Act, and that page contains the section that he's referencing, just for the parties to know.
Which section?
8A, right there, right in front of us. And so notwithstanding the provisions of item 7, which referencing pre-construction, so that's really not applicable here, and not limiting the provisions above, a person may not commence construction of a major utility facility for generation in the state of South Carolina without first having made a demonstration that the facility to be built has been compared to other generation options in terms of cost, reliability, and other regulatory implications deemed legally or reasonably necessary for consideration by the Commission. The Commission is authorized to adopt rules for such evaluation of other generation options. So that's where I want to rest and discuss, study, and maybe unpack that paragraph, because what I hear you all saying is that the consideration, whether it's cost or reliability or others, if I understand correctly, you all are certain that that consideration or those considerations were made during the IRP process and during the CPRE process. Okay, is that correct?
Right.
All right, all right. And I think that maybe, and I don't want to speak for Commissioner Caston or anyone else, but just I'll speak for myself. I would think that such a consideration will be made as a part of this application based on this particular facility and all of the specifics associated with this facility compared to other options that could be installed at this specific location. And assumptions are no good. My expectations are really meaningless only to me. They only mean, they're meaningless to you all. They only mean something to me. So that's okay. Doesn't
Vice
matter what
Chair, not to interrupt you, we need you to answer rather than just nodding your head, just for the record. Thank you.
And
Sorry.
no problem, Mr. Chair. I'm sort of talking a lot, so I will pause to let you answer. But I'm just trying to give you a little bit of background for this ultimate question. Put my expectations to the side. They don't really matter. Tell me why the company has met the burden, if you will, when it comes to comparison for cost, reliability for this specific solar facility compared to other generation sources or facilities that could have been installed at this particular location.
Right. So I think a couple of lines of thought on this. Number one, I think you're absolutely right that it all started with the IRP, then flowed through the CPRE. As a part of that CPRE, if you'll remember, there were 45 different projects that applied to be utility-owned solar projects. So those, some were in North Carolina, some were in South Carolina, some were submitted by third-party owned or third-party builds, some were Duke builds. The independent evaluator looked at all of that, and this project came out as one of the best solar projects that could have possibly been built in either North or South Carolina. So we start there as it's saying this is an incredible spot for solar, that it is a site we already owned, that already had an existing switching station that made solar really easy to connect to. And so, added that on with what Justin was talking about earlier with the tax benefits federally. That couldn't, that wouldn't have applied to another nuclear plant or something else. So the fact that it was something that solar could take advantage of on that site, everything, pardon the pun, under the sun made this particular site very, very attractive for solar. So then that CPRE site selected it. And then each one of us is here today, for a different requirement under that certificate. My particular, role here is to talk about policy and need. We absolutely need all the energy that we can get. Right now, there are, people moving into South Carolina every day. Census Bureau found South Carolina to be the fastest growing state in population last year. So we need all kinds of resources on our grid. So I think to put your mind in terms of comparing other sources here, we need to add as much as we can get everywhere. As a part of that, this particular site was a very, very, very attractive place to locate solar. That's not to say that we aren't going to try to locate gas or wind or whatever form of energy you want to pick. But what it does say is that for this site, it became a very, very attractive place to locate and build a utility-owned, specifically a utility-owned solar facility.
I agree with everything that you have just said, 100%. That does not help me understand how we get to yes under paragraph 8A when it seems as if this paragraph suggests that there should be a comparison of the Robertson Solar Facility as presented here to other generation sources that could produce the same or similar output. Now, I could be wrong in this interpretation.
Right.
I'm not saying that this is what I believe. I'm just saying, I'm just having a conversation with you. It appears that way, and I'm wanting you to help me understand.
And I'm going to answer this and let him elaborate on it, but I think the answer to the question that you're looking for really is you wouldn't build anything else on the Robinson site. It's conducive to the particular type of solar that we're putting on it.
Agree completely. And maybe to help address some of your connecting of the dots, the IRP does do that comparison of solar to other generation types based on those assumptions. That linkage of costs is then directly tied to CPRE, where we have that whole reference cost comparison, which relied on the cost basis of solar resources in the IRP. And right, we had that whole volumetric adjustment mechanism. If solar was cheaper than what the IRP assumed, we go procure more. If it's more expensive, we procure less. We didn't have any adjustment mechanisms needed based on costs. So I think that helps connect the dots on, yes, solar is compared to other resources in the context of the IRP. It is compared to other generation resources in context of CPRE and deemed as needed, cost-effective, altogether.
So I think to elaborate a little bit on that is the comparison in 8A was made in the IRP in terms of comparing it to other resources, maybe just not necessarily, like if you just take the Robinson slightly short than 350 acres, I don't think you would put anything else on that site for the reasons of all the benefits and attributes that a utility scale solar easily fits there.
I understand that completely, and thank you for elaborating. And you all may not be prepared to answer this question. If you're not, it's okay. What value does the Siting Act have to your theory of why Robinson should be installed?
Well, I think the Siting Act and the procedure today, in and of itself, is a determination, if you will, that this project is in the public interest. So I'm talking about need and policy. Joe is talking about the environmental and cultural assessment. Justin is looking at all the details and the project planning that went into formulating this project coming out of the CPRE. All of that taken together gets us to a point where we feel very strongly that the solar facility in question, Robinson Solar, is in the public interest. So I think that's ultimately what we're getting at. So from my perspective, seeing that need on the demand that exists in South Carolina, knowing we need to build more resources, this is just a very small drop in the bucket to the overall plan, but it's an important drop in the bucket, I think, because it has so many benefits. And so I can talk to the need, but Joe can talk to the environmental issues and other. But I think in total, what I would restate is that it really is the public interest that we're after. And without question, Robinson Solar is in the public interest.
Thank you, sir. It seems as if that the need was offered and approved in the IRP and that the reliability and the cost were offered improved in the CPRE.
I'd agree.
And because you agree there, we are in agreement there. That's why I'm struggling with the need of even going through the citing proceeding, because it seems as if, based on your theory, a lot of what you would need to prove through a citing hearing has already been proved, except for the environmental piece, it seems. And maybe I'm not looking at the Citing Act other than 8A. There's some other provisions, but the great majority of it, of what you would need to prove in this proceeding, it seems as if you're using the IRP and the CPRE.
Well, I think that's why you have other stakeholders who are saying that, this project helps system economy, helps reliability. I think that, to me, it's a project that is, very clearly in the public interest. I think, I don't want to put words in their mouth, but in ORS's testimony, they say that it's in the system economy, that it helps system economy and reliability. So I'd agree with you.
My final question, and pardon me for not knowing this off the top of my head, is this the first solar generating facility that the company is seeking approval through citing?
Yes, this is our first facility that's triggered this approval. We have others that are below that 75 megawatt threshold.
Okay. So, depending on how the commission rules here, whether it approves the facility or approves the application or denies it, would you agree that it's going to send, the commission will send some level of signal regarding the approval or denial of this application, considering it's the first one?
I think so, and I think this is a good one I think this is a good project to be the first one because of all the benefits we talked about earlier, the Swiss Army knife analogy, the fact that the switching station's there, all the many benefits. To me, it's an easy project to be the first one because of the fact that it does have so many benefits.
All right. That's all I have. Mr. Chair, thank you. And thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
May
Any
I-
further?
Can I ask one more question?
Commissioner
And I
Belson.
apologize. I should have checked my notes a little more
No problem.
closely. Mr. Grinstead or Mr. Freeman, I don't want to leave you out.
Thank you.
There was a letter filed by the State Historic Preservation Office. I think it was dated in March, but it was actually filed in April. Do you recall that letter?
Yes, Commissioner.
Okay. Has there been any follow-up by the utility on, I think there were instructions and some technical things that needed follow-up. Has that follow-up been done?
Absolutely, I can speak to that. So I believe you're referring to archaeological site
Yes.
38 CT 007. It's a small area that was identified in 1978 by, there were some pre-Mississippian pot shards, according to the record. That site was not able to be relocated. So basically, we went out and did a field test. We took 5 soil pit samples in that area. We're not able to locate any other artifacts there. However, when we submitted the letter, because that site was never supplied to the State Historic Preservation Office for consideration under the National Register of Historic Places, they recommended that we do a more confined delineation of that area. And we are currently scheduled to be out there in the next few weeks in order to satisfy that request.
Okay, so y'all are still working with SHPO, I think is how it might be
Yes, that's
pronounced.
correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Any further commissioner questions? Commissioner Carolyn Williams. I'm sorry, Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. It's hard to distinguish these lights from that angle, I'm sure. I think what I heard is that the decision of whether to go with company-owned or non-company-owned is part of the CPRE program. Is that correct?
Generally, yes, the CPRE has both utility ownership track and the third-party track.
And resulted in a balanced mixture of third-party owned and utility owned.
And this one came out as being, as you said many times, one of the top 4 or 5. And in that top 4 or 5, was there both company-owned and non-company-owned assets? Do you recall?
I think when we made that statement of being the top 10 percentile of the utility ownership side from a competitive standpoint, which is the balance of the economics and then the non-economic factors of the CPRE design.
Okay. So the entire site is, I think, 1,500 acres or so owned by the company. And I believe there's some coal ash ponds there. Does this have any relationship to the coal ash acreage?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's roughly over 1,000 acres company owned in this vicinity and a lot of existing uses, which is why we're only building on 350 acres of that. We do not build on any of the coal ash ponds. We're staying away from those areas.
All right. And then there's some description of these panels as being single axis tracking. Are there other types of tracking or?
Yes, there's 3 predominant designs for utility scale solar facilities today. First would be a fixed tilt system where the modules are pointed south on a fixed tilt racking at like a 22, 25 degree angle, no moving parts. These ones, though, will be on a drive line, and they'll rotate east to west throughout the day, just on one pivot point, single axis tracker. The other option is dual axis tracking. We don't really see a whole lot of that from a utility scale market basis. It's not as cost effective. So this facility was optimally. We looked at both fixed tilt and single axis tracker, but deemed single axis tracker, given the land available and layout, as being more cost effective.
And does the tracking device react to hailstorms or anything like that? Is that part of the way they work?
Correct. Yep. Hail, whether it's fixed tilt or single axis tracker, hail design is a part of the modules themselves. And then the tracking facilities have sensors, so when a high wind event comes through, they're able to stow in certain positions to minimize the force on the modules themselves, or they'll go up and down if hail is going to come to try to minimize damage.
All right, thank you. I believe that's all I have.
Commissioner Carly Williams.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Mr. Freeman, an Exhibit B has a memorandum sent from an ERM consultant to Steve Hendrickson on February 20th, and it talks about species-specific surveys for state-protected species listed for the site are not required as the site is privately owned. Could you tell me more about that finding and particularly the relationship to privately owned?
The determination that there's not a need for species-specific surveys was made due to the lack of critical habitat identified on the site. So both South Carolina DNR and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service both concurred that there's no previously identified critical habitat on the site, and that was in concurrence with the findings of our field habitat surveys. As to the South Carolina specific law regarding private property and the need for species-specific permitting there, I can't speak to that. However, the property itself, again, no critical habitat exists. We identified 4 species, targeted species of concern. One of them is U.S. Fish and Wildlife's tricolored bat, which is still in proposed status. They are anticipating it may be added to the listing as soon as the end of the summer. However, they've been saying that for a year and a half, so we're patiently waiting for them to make a final decision there. And then as far as the other 3 species, if you look into that memoranda from South Carolina DNR, they did outline some best management practices for each of those species as part of our ongoing coordination.
Thank you. And you also describe the Chesterfield and the Darlington requirements. Would you update us on where you are with those? I think that's for Mr. Freeman, but it might be.
Yeah, it might be me from a permitting standpoint.
Yes.
So in Chesterfield County, zoning regulations required a zoning compliance permit. We've secured that permit. It's gone through its public hearing process. So we just need construction permitting, building permits, electrical permits from Chesterfield County. The Darlington portion, solar is already a permitted use, so no rezoning, no conditional permits required there. We likewise just need a final site plan, which is like the building permit, the electrical permits.
So no hurdles there.
Correct.
And just in thinking about stormwater impact and hitting the panels, is that something under DHEC's rule, or is that under the county's evaluation?
Yes.
And is that already done?
So we don't have our stormwater erosion control permits yet. That's part of the plans for next year. We'll hire an EPC contractor that will do those detailed civil designs and procure the permits in place, given construction isn't slated to start until 2026.
Right.
To my knowledge, no, the counties don't have any additional stormwater standards, so it'll just be the state permitting process.
And I just realized I have no idea what the new name of the department is that oversees this, and I use the old one. Did you just use the new one?
No, I'm not familiar with the new name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, we will be soon, I'm sure. And you may have already covered this. Let me see. Well, do you have witness Seaman Wynn's testimony?
I believe so.
At the top of page 5 of that, you've covered some of this, but maybe not all of it. There's a list of kind of status as of the time of this filing, which was May 16th. And I just wanted to give you a chance to glance at that and tell us if there are any updates.
Yeah, we're looking at, you said top of page 5, right? 3 bullets there.
Exactly.
Correct. No updates that I can speak to. Again, the DHEC will go through the stormwater permitting when we get to that phase. I don't believe we need anything with DNR, correct?
Correct. I believe at this time, DNR, we've satisfied the initial, what we call informal consultation requirements with South Carolina Department of Natural Resources. We've received, again, that list of species and best management practices as they should be followed during construction or immediately preceding construction. I believe that there were 2 letters that were sent, a memoranda that was more recent, and one that came from March 8th, and I believe the more recent of the 2 failed to include the information that was provided from the same agency back on March 8th. And I think that's where that line actually comes from, because there was a request for field verification survey, which we had already done and submitted, and that's how we got the March 8th letter.
Okay.
And regarding the last one, we don't need anything from Parks and Recreation and Tourism in terms of permitting and further engagement.
And did they write and say that they were not participating?
No, I don't believe we ever received any response.
This is more general background kind of information. What was the intended use of the land?
So majority of the solar panels themselves are going to be located on the west side of Highway 151. That area was in silviculture.
Oh.
So it's in trees today, planted pines. Everything on the eastern side of Highway 151 is kind of the available land in between the existing infrastructure, between the plants and power lines and the coal ash facilities. And yeah, we're just not currently undeveloped land is how I would categorize that.
And I'm asking more from, not from how it's being used now, but why did the company procure it initially? And it may be why did they procure it initially? What, was there an initial intent, or was it a lack of specificity as to how much you would need?
I can't speak to the detailed records of which parcels were procured when, but we do know that the original coal facility, right, was commissioned in the 1960s, and then gas added and nuclear in the 70s. So I would surmise that the land was procured with those original intents and land needed for those original uses. This is now taking further beneficial uses of that existing assets.
And do you know if other uses have been considered for the property, for the company?
Other than the silviculture on those parcels that were conducive to that, not to my knowledge. There is an internal process we go through on any company-owned land. When one unit wants to use it for purpose A, we go and check in with the other units to make sure that there's not competing. There's a planned substation to go there. So we did do that internal collaboration back in the early 2020, 2021 timeframe.
Would that not be an element of your, I'm not going to finish because Mr. Grinstead is shaking his head, so why don't you tell me what you're thinking?
Well, I would just say it's another reason to go to Commissioner Williams, Commissioner Caston's question on 8A. It's just, in terms of the land going through that internal process definitely, and, helps lead towards that comparison to help, meet that requirement.
We've said a lot today, and this is a big, broad question, but it just lets you say it one more time. How does this facility support system, economy, and reliability?
So I think the most important thing in terms of that question is really diversity and a mix of a diverse set of resources on the overall grid, both in South Carolina and the greater Carolinas footprint. And so, to every different resource has somewhat different qualities and some benefits and negatives that all, that describe that type of resource. And so I think having a diverse resource mix is part of that. I think also having a diversity in terms of ownership and the qualities and the benefits that come with different types of ownership there. Having this be a utility-owned asset that we can easily have maintenance on, can take offline if we need to, and then have other resources on the grid make up for that. All that leads itself towards a help in terms of system economy and reliability.
Could there be lessons learned that you experience as the owner that translate into managing PPAs or how you do the CPRE process in the future?
Certainly, I think so, and I think we strive to capture lessons learned anytime we're building a solar facility across the company's footprint. That may impact future planned facilities, how we design them, what equipment we want to procure, that standardization as the portfolio of utility-owned assets grows, and how we look at third parties and how they operate and what controllability rights that we have and how best to integrate and manage across the system. I think there certainly is opportunities there. And then even I think when we look at the 2022 RFP versus 2023 versus 2024, there certainly have been changes to the overall mechanisms as well.
other big picture kind of question. How does public convenience and necessity require the construction of this facility? I know we've said it in a lot of ways, but I'm giving you one more chance to answer it.
Sure. I think overall, it was to reiterate the conversation I had with Vice Chair Williams. It's public interest, really. It's whether or not Robinson Solar is in the public interest, I think. And so, when you look at all the factors of each one of us have talked about today in a big picture, it lends itself to the idea that, without question, Robinson Solar is in the public interest. And so, whether that's all the many characteristics we've talked about, but in a big picture way, the short answer is public interest. It's in the public interest.
Sorry for the delay. How would the construction time period associated with this, we covered that one. This is a general question. I was surprised at the timing of what you anticipate and the fact that we're looking now at 2027 for this facility. Why is it that time consuming? And I realize that knowing that we're a tiny piece of that time-consuming process.
As to why can't it get built faster?
Mm-hmm.
I think a couple of driving factors there. One is, again, that equipment availability, 3-year lead times on transformers and breakers. The other big item is interconnection. We just finished the interconnection study process just last month and got our interconnection study agreement, which validates when our transmission component can be done. Once we validate that backfeed date, when the switching station equipment can be done, the existing switching station equipment can be done, we need power from the grid in order to commission the inverters, and that's not going to be available until that fall of 2027.
In the application, there was some discussion from a public engagement perspective of a website launched and stakeholders' involvement. And I think when I read it in the application, I thought it had already happened, but then when I read some testimony, I felt like it was something in the future. So would you describe a little bit more about that? And if there has been interaction, what has it been?
Yeah, I can certainly recap what we've done to date and then what's planned. So as a part of the county permitting processes, there already has been a public engagement process that included establishing the website, which provide the public with an opportunity to find information as well as contact us. And then through the county permitting processes, there's been a number of hearings in Chesterfield and Darlington County through the Chesterfield zoning compliance permit. And then we've also done fee in lieu of tax agreement hearings between both counties. So all neighbors have been notified of those hearings via a newspaper as well as mailers with the opportunity to participate in those hearings. Nobody from the public attended any of those hearings. And then going on a go-forward basis, our best practice continues to integrate stakeholder engagement. So that'll primarily look like we've committed to doing another open house for neighbors. That'll give more details on the construction timeline, activities, what they can expect, who to call, contact information, should they have any issues or concerns, as well as just postcard information just to provide them what's going to happen when as we get closer to that 2026 timeframe.
And I just add that the website does thoroughly walk through what to expect at each step of the building process. So it's very user friendly for the potential neighbors.
And what kind of reaction have you had from the public other than what you covered regarding public hearings and lack of attendance?
So yeah, no opposition stated in any of the public hearing processes. Outside of that, following the public hearings, we've received one inquiry from a landowner via email, which came through the website. And they own 2 parcels of property, no residential structure, and voiced a concern on property impact to property values. And so we responded to that. There was a verbal conversation with that landowner. We've addressed our due diligence on and knowledge on impact to residential property areas in the vicinity of utility scale solar. There's a number of real estate studies that we've conducted that show there is no correlation to an impact on real estate values in adjacent to utility scale solar. Following that initial conversation, this particular landowner has decided to not engage with further conversations. Part of that engagement, we walked through the proactive steps we've taken with the limited residential neighbors in the area. There's roughly, say, 17, is what we estimate on residential dwellings. So we proactively included setbacks from those property boundaries to keep the equipment away from them, as well as that integration of a vegetative buffer that Mr. Freeman spoke to, either leaving existing trees or supplementing that with new plantings, so adjacent to those residential parcel boundaries, as well as to the main highway 151 to minimize that visual impact to the community.
What is the vegetative buffer depth?
I don't think we established that on our site layout, but standard is anywhere from 10 to 15 feet of existing vegetation from the property boundary. Those details will get vetted out in greater clarity once we do that final site plan permitting process with both counties.
Okay. And with Commissioner Caston, there was discussion about end of life cycle. And did I read something about a bond that was in place related to?
Neither county requires a bond in this particular case. In the application or in my testimony, we speak about an asset retirement obligation, more of a liability that'll get recorded in recognition of that future obligation.
And are there other compatible uses that will happen on the solar farm? We get applications where sometimes there's grazing, there's native plants planted. Sometimes it's pretty enlightening what can happen.
Yeah. We have proactively incorporated pollinators into the site layout. We got approximately a 5-acre area that fit very, very well to proactively dedicate to pollinators. Besides that, we use native grasses right in between our solar panels throughout the facility. To be determined whether we use sheep or other animals from a vegetation standpoint. We've got a little bit of a history of that as a company. We've tried it in some North Carolina facilities. We're piloting it again on another facility right now. So that'll be an evolving strategy of what makes the most sense from a cost. Sheep don't always eat every single type of grass, so there's still some manual vegetation management that you need to do. But we certainly continue to evaluate that across the portfolio of solar assets.
It's impressive what each of you know. So thank you for educating me. And was storage considered for this site?
No. And the reason being that 2022 CPRE program was for solar-only assets. It did not contemplate storage at the time. Subsequent RFPs do allow for solar plus storage.
Is there additional land on this property where it might be considered?
There might be some pockets here and there that potentially could be. To my knowledge today, there's not a storage project under development.
Just in thinking about the cost evaluation of this facility, it strikes me that you know what the cost per megawatt would be for this facility. Has any kind of comparison, or how I'm going to ask a question I think you can answer today. How would that cost per megawatt stand up against other company known assets in terms of the cost per megawatt?
I can speak to, yeah, there certainly is that cost per megawatt comparison in the CPRE procurement. And that's a big part of how projects are determined from a lease cost and evaluated standpoint. I think outside of that comparison to other generation types is in the IRP space, which I don't think we've got. It isn't a part of this. It's, and I guess the next docket to come on the current IRP evaluations.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Commissioner Cassidy.
Just a couple follow-up questions, you know, from both Commissioner Williams. And I think, Mr. Greenstead, and you didn't say this, just correct me. And in the questioning, you said something about you wouldn't put any other generation on that site. I hand wrote it. Is there anything on that site or the existing NG site that would prevent the company from installing a natural gas or any other generation unit?
Can you repeat? Is there anything on the site that would prevent us from?
Yeah. If I understood you correctly, I thought you wouldn't put anything else on that site, and I was just curious. I mean, is it because nothing else could go on that site, or is there anything to prevent a CT unit or any other generation from going on that site?
I think two of the characteristics we've identified previously have elevated this existing utility-owned site as being attractive for us to pursue for solar, right? Years ago is when we started that process. There's a separate team in Duke that's leading the gas siting initiatives, and there was no conflict, both of us competing for this site at that time. And I forget, in 2022, right, 2021, you had made the decision, we're pursuing solar at that site, and you ride that out, right? So we stopped evaluating other generation opportunities for that site while we were advancing it for solar.
So what I think I'm hearing, and I think I heard earlier that there is infrastructure existing in place near the site, on the existing site for natural gas or whatever facilities. And you said the process stopped when you decided, you know, we want solar, whatever that process was. But I want to make sure I understand that answer. All that said, are you saying that other than you stopped the process and decided to go with solar, as far as physically that site, there's nothing on that site that would prevent another generation source from being on it, is there?
And perhaps maybe that's an appropriate follow-up item. I don't think we lead the siting of gas. I think we could ask a different company, SME, to evaluate the attributes to have gas sited here, if that's the question at hand. And they can speak to the pros and cons, or why we didn't pursue gas at this specific location.
Are you talking about Duke?
Correct.
Okay.
Given because the main reason we're doing solar here is because we already owned the land.
Yes, I understand. And it wasn't a trick question. I was trying to understand what that meant. Was there something there?
Right. I think what I was getting at, Commissioner, is that this is so conducive to a utility-owned solar project that it really makes it I don't want to overgeneralize, but it makes it somewhat of a no-brainer to pick solar for that site.
Okay. And that kind of actually leads me to the other question. I think Commissioner Carol Lee Williams asked about the system economy and reliability. And you talked about, wherever I wrote it, you know, different type of ownerships, you know, the maintenance and the ability to take it offline and all. If relative to PPAs that I know the company has, in those PPAs, does the company have the ability to I guess, take those offline, or a scheduled maintenance, scheduled downtime?
I think the way I would answer that, Commissioner, is I think with the utility-owned side, it's much easier to have it be a part of a overall planned system. That's not to say anything negative about our friends that help us with third party, but there are some value adds to the customer from ease of the utility being able to schedule all that with a system with an asset that we own.
And final question. I can't remember if it was you, Mr. LaRoche, or Mr. Grinstead, whoever it was. We were talking about, I guess, the interconnection. And you mentioned the transmission component for the interconnection. Is that in addition to the, I guess, confidential cost in that redacted version, the transmission component?
It's inclusive of that cost.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. No more questions.
Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you. I'm sorry to do this, but it was very impactful to me what I heard you say about the internal process that the company went through. So I would like for you to summarize that again and add a little bit more detail to it if you can. And just to get more specific, what I'm asking about is, I think you said back in 2020 that you were evaluating what could go on this land, and I'd like you to talk about that internal process. Who was involved? What decision got made? Because I think it was helpful to me to hear that. I'd like you to reiterate it, expound on it.
Yep, we can address that.
Can you address it now?
Oh, sure, yeah. I thought you asked that as a follow-up. Yeah. So real estate shepherds a process where anytime there's a use or disposal of company-owned land, that they seek input from those key internal stakeholders, primarily transmission, distribution, renewables, generation, and just generation development. So there's a process where somebody makes the request, so I made the request to occupy this land for solar facilities. Everybody gets an opportunity to review that request and either voice their concern or say, nope, I got no conflicts, you can do it. So we have an internal process to gain consensus. And so we went through that process. Everybody said, yes, we agree with using it. Obviously, added to that, and I think another big stakeholder is the Robinson nuclear plant themselves and the gas plant themselves. So we've had a number of coordination with plant personnel and kept them, they were a stakeholder in that process to ensure there's no conflict, right? And we talked about that before. Is it going to be behind the fence, right, or outside the fence? And there was no conflicts and issues with us pursuing solar throughout that process. And we advanced it.
So if any of those teams thought there was an option that made sense from a reliability perspective or a cost perspective, that would have been voiced. Is that true?
I think that the scope of the process I talked through is more of a land use, not necessarily a system planning, a system cost standpoint. It's is transmission, right, or does the plant need to run a new gas line, a new road? Is distribution planning a new substation, and other stakeholders, internal stakeholders of using the land is the primary focus of that process.
Okay. I appreciate the clarification. Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions? Gentlemen, I don't really have a question, but I would say I'm a little troubled if we talk about being, or you talk about being IRP experts or familiar with it, but not to know where you're going to get the supplies or get the parts, where they come from, or where the parts you got came from. With the present geopolitical world we're living in and problems that are going on, that's concerning. I hope, that will be given some attention as to, in your planning, to look at that and look at it carefully.
Certainly,
Thank you.
we can certainly provide further updates as we procure those additional pieces of equipment.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Briefly, thank you. Mr. Grinstead, let's talk more about generation mix. Is the company building gas for the system in North Carolina?
Yes.
And are there currently North Carolina CPCN proceedings for gas facilities and CCs, NCTs pending right now?
I believe so.
And would it surprise you to learn that the company provided notice of that to the commission in the IRP docket on April 18th, 2024?
It wouldn't surprise me.
And would it surprise you to learn that the company filed a notice in the IRP docket on June 28th, 2024, that it was entering DICES for CC at a different site in South Carolina?
It wouldn't surprise me.
Is generation mix the focus of an IRP proceeding?
It is.
And is this project a component of how the company cites to execute and seeks to execute on that generation mix?
It is.
No further redirect, but we do have additional comments from Mr. Trawick.
May I make a request, Mr. Chairman?
Certainly.
Thank you. And this doesn't have to do with the panel. We're certainly familiar with the one lawyer per witness rule, but at this time, Mr. Chairman, we respectfully ask, pursuant to SC Code and Regs 103-846C and Rule 201 of the South Carolina Rules of Evidence, that the Commission take judicial notice of the IRP dockets and the CPRE dockets referenced in these gentlemen's testimony. And to add just a little further clarification for that, I would like, since we talked a lot about the legal position and the legal requirements of the statute today, under 8A, I did, if it pleases the commission, want to offer the company's position on that. So it's our primary position that that showing does not need to be made per site. But even if it has, the company believes that we have made it through the IRP proceedings, the CPRE proceedings, and then this proceeding that flowed through that. I think that's a consistent reading of Act 62, which tweaked all three of those. And if we were in a position in which those precursors had not occurred, I think that's a very fair question about whether the showing has been made. But we think the showings have been made and the groundwork has been laid to get us all the way here. And so that's the company's position in this proceeding.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick. We certainly take notice of the earlier IRPs and any orders we have that are in place. As far as your testimony, there's a lot to be decided. Based on the redirect, is there anything further from our ORS?
There's nothing from ORS at this time, Chair Powers.
Thank you. As the Department of Health and Environmental Control, Ms. Dickman, you certainly have a right to ask any questions, and as we continue to hear, and we're not going to overlook you, but I understand your position that at this time you feel like you're just listening in. Is that correct?
Sir, I think that I have unmuted myself. I am not being involved as a participant or legally representing DHEC in these proceedings. I am observing because it's very interesting for me to learn something more about the process. So thank you.
Okay, well, I know you understand by statute that you are a party to the action and have that privilege, but I respect your position. Anything further from the company?
Nothing further from the company, thank you.
Okay, is that your case?
That is our case.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in a kind of a strange position. We kind of had a drop dead time we thought of 12:30 because we have two meetings this afternoon. We have a commission business meeting, which, there's some 20 items I think we're dealing with, and, as well as we have a meeting after that. And I hate it, but looks like we're gonna have to continue this tomorrow morning. Is that a particular problem for anyone?
None from the company?
Mr. Chairman, so one of our witnesses, Mr. Jeff Gordon, has an existing conflict tomorrow, so I don't. Yeah, so that may present a problem. Certainly happy to talk with the company and see if there's a way we can try to resolve that, whether that may be through stipulated testimony. I certainly don't know if the commission has questions for Mr. Gordon.
Well, you know, our problem is we start a major case with Dominion Monday morning.
I've heard tell of that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I'm glad you're aware. I don't know, have no way of knowing how long that's going to last. And as far as scheduling, I think we've either got to look at tomorrow, or we don't know when we're looking at completing this matter.
I certainly understand. I don't know how to get around an existing conflict with him now. And I certainly do not want to in any way limit these celebrations this afternoon. But an option may be to come back and finish up this afternoon. I don't know how long the commission may have questions for ORS's witnesses, but you know, happy to talk with commission staff afterwards and see if we can come up with a solution.
Okay. Well, do you want to, let's take about a 5-minute break and you all confer and let's see where we are?
That would be perfect. Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll break then for about 5 minutes. Thank you. We're back in the case 2024-109-E, application of Duke Energy Progress. It's my understanding ORS is now going to present witnesses or witness.
Well, we did have a few options, just wanted to see what the commission's pleasure was. Mr. Gordon is certainly available. We can go ahead and put him up now. I don't know how, I don't want to speak for the company. I don't believe they are intending to cross-examine him. So then it would be a matter of what commission questions have as to how long it goes. But if the commission's inclined.
I think the commission feels we could move pretty quickly with it, and which makes me wonder, could we just put the panel up? Now, once they're up, they're sworn, nobody can talk to them, whatever, you thinks.
The only caveat with that would be with Mr. Gordon is if there's still questions that go past the time you want to cut off, we may have to figure out how we deal with that. But we certainly have no opposition to that.
Well, let's deal with Mr. Gordon.
Well, do you want to put the panel up, both of them?
If you think we can do it.
Sure.
Chair Powers, we call up Mr. Jeff Gordon and Mr. Michael Seaman Wynn.
All right, please come forward.
And Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, if I just would just ask counsel, take your time. I can tell you may be a little bit flustered. We have nowhere else to go.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you'd raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Gordon, we're going to start with you. Can you please state your full name for the record?
Jeffrey A. Gordon.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Office of Regulatory Staff as a regulatory analyst.
Are you the same Jeffrey Gordon who prepared or caused to be prepared 7 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in this proceeding on May 16th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I ask you the same questions posed in your pre-filed testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, ORS asks that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Gordon be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of witness Gordon will be placed in the record as if given from the stand.
Thank you. Mr. Gordon, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Please present your summary to the commission.
Good afternoon, Chair Powers, Vice Chair Williams, and members of the commission. The purpose of my testimony is to set forth and support ORS's recommendations resulting from the examination and review of the application of Duke Energy Progress for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and Public Convenience and Necessity to construct a 76-megawatt solar photovoltaic project to be located in Darlington and Chesterfield counties. My review focused on the basis of the need for the solar facilities and whether the solar facilities will serve the interests of system economy and reliability. I reviewed the applications, direct testimonies of the companies, witnesses, and numerous studies included in the applications, witness exhibits, and discussed in testimony. Additionally, I reviewed materials provided by the companies through discovery. The companies identified the need for the proposed facilities based on Duke's 2022 IRP. The company's 2022 IRP update included nameplate capacity additions of approximately 3,450 megawatts of solar from 2027 to 2037, with 150 megawatts added annually in years 2027 through 2029. The company issued a request for proposal for solar energy in 2022. As part of the 2022 RFP, the company retained Charles River Associates as an independent evaluator to assess the proposals submitted by bidders. The report by Charles River Associates as the independent evaluator of Duke Energy's 2022 Solar Procurement Program RFP selected the Robinson Renewable Energy Center for the utility ownership track. Based on the information provided by the company, ORS concluded the projects can serve the interests of system economy and reliability. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Gordon. Now turning to you, Mr. Seaman Wen, can you please state your full name for the record?
Michael Seaman Wen.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the Office of Regulatory Staff as the Deputy Director of Energy Operations.
Are you the same Michael Seaman Wen who prepared or caused to be prepared a confidential version and a public version of your 6 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in connection with this proceeding that was filed on May 16th, 2024?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to your direct testimony?
Yes, I have 3 minor corrections, all on page 3 of my direct testimony. On lines 15, 19, and 21, the phrase Robin Solar Center should read Robinson Solar Center.
Thank you, Mr. Seaman. With these corrections, if I asked you the same questions in your pre-filed direct testimony today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Chair Powers, I ask that Mr. Seaman Wen's confidential and public version of pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand with these corrections, and request that the Commission please keep the confidential version under seal.
The direct testimony of witness Seaman Wen with corrections will be entered into the record as if given from the stand, and the confidential portion of that shall be kept confidential.
Thank you. Mr. Seaman Wen, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes.
Can you please provide that to the Commission? Thank you.
Yes. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to set forth and support ORS's recommendations resulting from the examination and review of Duke Energy Progress's application for a Certificate of Environmental Compatibility and public convenience and necessity to construct and operate the Robinson Solar Center. I also addressed the proposed transmission facilities required to interconnect the solar facilities to the transmission grid. My review focused specifically on the impact of the facility, whether the environmental impact of the facility was justified, the reasonable assurances that the facility will conform to applicable state and local laws and regulations, and whether the public convenience and necessity requires the construction of the facility. The Siting Act directs that an application contain a description of the location of the major utility facilities to be built, a summary of any studies that have been made of the environmental impact of the facilities, a statement explaining the needs for the facilities, and other such information as applicant may consider relevant or as the Commission may require. The application included the description of the facility, its locations, and descriptions of the intended use and need for the facility. The company's studies provided as part of the application indicate the facility will not have a significant impact on the environment, and the impact on cultural and land use resources will be minimized by the facility. The company affirms through the application and pre-filed testimony the project will conform to all applicable state and local laws and regulations. Based on the information provided by the company, ORS understands the facility will result in minimum impact to the environment, and as addressed by ORS witness Gordon, will serve the interest of system economy and reliability. This concludes my summary.
Thank you. Chair Powers, at this time, I'll turn over the panel for questions from opposing counsel and the Commission.
Mr. Troywick or Ms. Henderson, do you have any questions?
No questions from the company. Thank you.
Thank you. Any Commissioner questions? Vice Chair Williams.
Thank you, Chair Powers. Gentlemen, 2 quick questions. Both of you all support the company's application?
Yes, Commissioner.
Yes.
And both of you all support their theory of the IRP and the CPRE demonstrated the consideration of cost, reliability, and other applicable standards to result in approving the application based on how it's presented in its current form?
I would have to have Mr. Gordon address that one
And I
specifically,
guess now,
sir.
and I'm sorry to cut you off. Now we've taken judicial notice of the IRP and CPRE filing. So I just want to make sure, I understand that you agree with the application as filed, and now we are considering the IRPs and the CPRE. I want to make sure you support how the company believes they could get to yes for this application, considering it's the first company-owned solar facility before the commission for consideration.
Now that the commission is taking notice, judicial notice of the IRP and CPRE, yes, I would agree that the IRP has identified a need for a diverse mix of resource generation, including solar, across every portfolio. I would agree that the process, as it stands, taking judicial notice of the IRP, does adequately consider alternate generation.
Okay, and I apologize for this third follow-up question. The theory that the single site or specific site for Robinson Solar does not need consideration of cost and reliability, but generally speaking, through the IRP and CPRE, considerations of cost and reliability and other standards are enough for the commission to approve an application.
The IRP doesn't generally produce specific sites to be built, but it does produce a list of generation resources and how much of each should be considered.
And you think that's enough for approval here in this proceeding?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Chair, that's all I have.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Commissioner Caston.
Follow-up question, and good afternoon, I'll rush. Probably to you, Mr. Gordon, but certainly, if you want to respond also. What does system economy and reliability mean to you?
To me, it means getting the most reliable generation for the best price. What's best for the customer.
Okay. And follow up to Commissioner J. Williams' question relative to 58. 33-110-8A, I think it is. I think you said, you know, the IRP. Is it ORS's position that section 58-33-110-8A, comparing other generation sources relative to cost and reliability, is adequately served in an IRP in a level of detail that question can be answered, or those questions can be answered?
Excuse me. As this relates to a legal observation or opinion, I'm not sure the panel is the best to be able to answer that at this time within the scope of their review.
I understand, but I don't think it's a legal question. I think it's a technical question.
Thank you.
But that's me. You make the rule.
I think we can take it for what it's worth. Go ahead, Commissioner.
It is my opinion that the IRP is a vital part of the process, and that to dismiss what the IRP says would be premature. But if the commission wishes additional studies to be done, I do believe that it is stated in the Siting Act that the commission can request additional information.
No more questions. Thank you.
Any further commissioner questions? Anything else from any party?
Chair Powers.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I just have a suggestion for ORS. I would suggest that Mr. Mustian should be wearing Mr. Gordon's shirt.
Well, I may never wear this suit again after this, but I appreciate the
Mr. Mustian, I know you're aware we're having a celebration, but it's not Easter.
No, sir. I figured there would be cake, and I might bring ice cream.
There will be cake. Nothing further from anyone? All right, well, thank you very much. I hope no one feels rushed. We were just trying to keep with the schedule. But we are here, as Vice Chair stated, make sure everybody's heard. And I thank you for your work in this matter, and look forward to seeing you again. We're done.